Hello, and welcome to Smart Girls, Bold Questions, Girls Inc.'s first candidate forum. My name is Isabella Willard. I'm 18 and I am a senior at St. Michael's High School. I am also the Girls Inc. of Santa Fe Girl of the Year for 2019. I will explain the formatting of tonight's event, but before I do that, I would like to introduce the Director of Programs for Girls Inc. of Santa Fe, Madonna Hernandez.
Thank you, Izzy. This is amazing.
Yes, it is.
I am so proud of you all. All right. So good evening, everyone. As Izzy said, my name is Madonna Hernandez, Director of Programs for Girls Incorporated of Santa Fe. And I am up here on stage this evening because Kim Brown, our President and CEO, is at home with her family nursing the flu. So we are all sending our love to her. First, I would like to start with a big thank you for the Marks Family Foundation for supporting tonight's event. It's so important that we receive investment from the community for this work. Second, thank you to the Girls Inc. Leadership Council for all of your hard work, research, and many hours of time you have invested in this powerful event. Lastly, thank you to our staff who have come together in bringing forward such a far-reaching goal. When we first started the conversation about a candidate forum, it seemed like an awesome idea, but there were more question marks than I could count. Fast forward to this evening, I'm jumping out of my skin with excitement, and I know that we covered all of our bases. At Girls Incorporated of Santa Fe, our mission is to inspire all girls to be strong, smart, and bold, and that is healthy, educated, and independent. We give them the tools and support they need to succeed, including age-appropriate research-based programming delivered by trained professionals who mentor and guide them in a safe pro-girl environment. Through these experiences, they learn to set and achieve goals, boldly confront challenges, resist gender stereotypes, and see college as attainable. And tonight, this candidate forum is a perfect example of that work. Our intentional focus on advocacy is a natural extension of the Girls Inc. mission. Through our advocacy efforts, Girls Inc. is committed to advancing the rights and opportunities of girls and young women with a particular focus on the needs of girls from low-income communities and girls who face multiple intersectional challenges. Informed by the voices of girls themselves, we advocate to break through the barriers girls face and to reform systems that impede their success. Now this evening, I am hoping that we will all be on our best behavior. We want to set a positive example for all of our young people in this room when it comes to having a difference of opinions and/or values. Please reference your program to read about the behavior guidelines for this evening. Now, candidates, please be sure to pay attention to our timekeepers in the front row, as they will be giving you your time warnings for how long you have to speak. If you find yourself past your time, I may kindly interrupt you. Before we get started, if you are interested in getting to know more about Girls Inc., please sign up for a tour or visit us on our website at girlsincofsantafe.org. Take it away, Izzy.
Thanks, Madonna. Tonight, we'll be talking to 7 candidates running for the 3rd Congressional District of New Mexico. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Farron Aaron will give a 15-second warning and will hold up a red card and ring a chime when time has run out. If you have a question for the candidates, please write them down and we'll pick some of them to ask at the end. There are cards available under your seats. You can also use those cards to give us your email address in order to learn more about our upcoming events. And now we will introduce ourselves and the candidates.
Hello, my name is Isabella Garcia, and I am a sophomore at Capitol High School. Mr. Blair, will you please stand up? John Blair grew up on the south side of Santa Fe, graduated from Santa Fe High, and is proud to call Santa Fe his home with his husband Billy. President Obama appointed John to work for him at the Department of the Interior to fight climate change, and he's worked for good New Mexico Democrats like U.S. Senator Jeff Bingaman, then U.S. Representative Martin Heinrich, Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse Oliver, and then State Auditor Hector Balderas. John wants to represent you in Congress to fight climate change, prevent future gun violence, and make health care affordable and accessible to all New Mexicans.
Hello, my name is Levy Martinez. I'm a senior at Santa Fe High, and Ms. Fernandez is already standing up. Thank you. Born and raised in Las Vegas, New Mexico, Teresa Ledger Fernandez worked for 30 years on behalf of New Mexico's committees to advance voting rights, promote tribal sovereignty, and protect Acequia waters. She helped secure nearly $1 billion in funding, financing to build schools, businesses, health clinics, and infrastructure. Served as vice chair of MALDEF, the nation's preeminent Latino civil rights organization, and for 20 years helped lead the HomeWise board, a former White House fellow under President Bill Clinton and vice chair of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation under President Obama. Teresa knows the Washington that matters to New Mexico.
Hello, my name is Lila Casada, and I'm a freshman at New Mexico School for the Arts. Ms. Montoya, will you please stand? Laura Montoya was born, raised, and educated in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and has been elected Sandoval County Treasurer for the past 7 years. She has 17 years of experience in federal, state, and local government. Currently serving as the Legislative Chair for the Treasurer's Affiliate, Vice Chair of Finance, Pensions and Intergovernmental Affairs with NACO, and the Next Generation Chair for the Young Elected Officials in the United States. Laura believes representation should reflect a piece of who we are and wants all young women to know that no matter what struggles you are going through today, with hard work and determination, you can overcome and be whatever and whoever you want.
Hello, my name is Ashlyn Tenario. I am from the Pueblos of Laguna and Santo Domingo. I am a junior at the Santa Fe Indian School. Ms. Plame, will you please stand? Santa Fe Valerie Plame is the covert CIA operations officer, outed in retaliation for speaking against Bush administration's false premise for invading Iraq. While in CIA, her assignment was nuclear proliferation, keeping nuclear weapons out of hands of rogue states and terrorists. A graduate of Penn State with master's degrees from the London School of Economics and College of Europe, Valerie wants to serve her country again at a time when it is under siege and be a loud voice for New Mexicans in Washington.
Hello, my name is Indira Tobias Wilder, and I'm a junior at the master's program. Representative Sanchez, will you please stand? Representative Joseph Sanchez was born and raised in the Espanola Valley just north of Santa Fe. Mr. Sanchez was previously an engineering manager at Los Alamos National Laboratory and CEO for Jemez Mountains Electric, the largest electrical cooperative in New Mexico. He has his bachelor's and master's degrees in electrical engineering from the University of New Mexico and his MBA from New Mexico State University.
Mr. Cerna, will you please stand up? Marco Cerno's lifelong commitment to public service provides him with an understanding of the unique challenges facing our families. As first judicial district attorney, he has worked tirelessly to solve many of the problems facing our communities. From a treatment-oriented approach to our deeply entrenched drug problems to cracking down on violent crimes, Marco has been on the front line defending and protecting our communities.
Hello, my name is Ruby Reyes Tapia, and I am an 8th grader at Tierra Encantada Charter School. Mr. Tisdale, will you please stand? Kyle Tisdale is a public interest environmental attorney who has dedicated his career to fighting for the environmental rights of people and communities in New Mexico and across the country. He is called to service by the urgency of this moment, and with his campaign, he is advancing a plan for action that strives to secure a livable future for our children. This plan is centered around justice for those most affected by the energy transition, as well as those most impacted by the climate-driven disasters our nation is already experiencing.
My name is Deneh Benali, running for U.S. Congress, District 3. Looking forward to representing this whole community, this whole state. I'm a graduate from New Mexico State University, New Mexico Military Institute as a civil engineer. And again, thank you.
Our first question is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? Answers will start with John Blair.
Oh, man. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you all for the questions. I actually think the superpower I'd like most would be able to fly. Because I think it would be nice to be able to be in lots of places very quickly, particularly in this district. It's a short 3.5-hour drive to Portales or Farmington each way, and so it takes a little bit of time to get everywhere. But I think that would allow me also to be helpful to other people, and my mom doesn't fly an airplane, so I could fly her and go places as well, so that would be pretty good, so I want to fly.
Thank you. Well, I think I want to have a force field. So I want a force field, and everyone who is in my force field, like if you were listening to somebody, you got to listen. Like not listening like until you can talk, like how we often listen, right? But actually listening to find out what they want to tell you and what you can understand from them. But then on the other side, if you're doing the talking, you can't like just use your regular, cliches, and I'm going to say this over and over again, but really like maybe talking about like what you're worried about or thinking. And then that way, like we'd learn each other's stories. And learning each other's stories is the way we actually, I think, fix the world. And so I like that superpower. But the great thing about the superpower is I think it's something that we could all cultivate. So we could all put on the superwoman cape of understanding.
My superpower would be to teleport. Not only from location to location, but from history, so that we can learn from our mistakes, so that we can know where we're going. You have to know your history in order to move forward. And so I would really like to teleport not only from one side of the county to the other, but also into different generations so that I can learn from them so that we could build a better New Mexico.
First of all, thank you to Girls Inc. My daughter, who's now 20 and a sophomore in college, participated in one of your summer programs as an 8-year-old, and I've been fortunate enough to help raise funds for your wonderful programs through the years. Thank you for having us all here this evening. My superpower would be to understand what the other person is thinking. Why is that? Because how many times all of us, we're not communicating well. We think we know what we're saying, and then we say it again louder because it wasn't received the way it was intended. And empathy is one of the most important qualities that all of us could have to understand where the other person is coming from. And when you're not getting through, boy, I would love to know, I got to start again. Thanks.
Thank you. My superpower would be to make people get along. It's unfortunate that in our country there's a lot of divisiveness. People don't get along. We can't compromise on things. Our communities are the same way. Families, we see it all over. Communities, if we could all get along and compromise and just move forward and respect each other, I think we could go a long way. So that would be my superpower.
All right, and before Marco Cerna, you answer, I'm going to ask that we hold applause until we are all finished and we are doing our closing statements.
Now she says it.
Yes. Thank you.
No, I'm joking. My superpower would be to immediately impeach Trump. Just kidding. Although I wish it were a superpower. But I think my superpower would be to heal. Not only the sick physically, but the sick emotionally, for two reasons. One, excuse me, my son, who's a month old, is currently in the hospital, so I would love to heal him right away. But two, with the emotional part, is I see so many people who suffer from emotional, mental health issues, and what that does not only to them but to families. And I wish I could be able to heal that, because I think it would make our community not only a better place, a safer place, and a more lovable place. And I apologize for the emotion.
So you can enforce the no clapping rule for me. I think my superpower would be the ability to spread love and compassion amongst our communities and amongst the people that we engage in conversations with, not only because of the divisiveness that exists, I think, broadly throughout society and culture right now, but really the inability of us to think beyond the next moment, and in particular for future generations and the 7 generations that are to come and inherit the mess that we have made. And so that would be my superpower. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I want to recognize Girls Inc. for setting up this event. Thank you very much. And basically, my superpower, I don't know if it's really a superpower, but it's to have wisdom and discernment. Because I think if an individual has that type of ability, they can do a lot of great things, not only for the community, but for this nation, and also to understand situations that occurred. For example, the death of Kobe Bryant. Things happen, and I think to have wisdom, that would be a good thing to have. Thank you.
As a young woman, it's important to me to stand up for women's health services due to the fact that one of my best friends not only had an abortion, but also gave birth to a beautiful baby boy all in the span of a year. What are your thoughts on federal government funding for reproductive health services? And if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, would you support a federal law guaranteeing access to abortion? Answers will start with Teresa Ledger Fernandez.
Absolutely, absolutely. The decisions that your friend made are the decisions that belong to her. Those decisions do not belong to the government, and they must be protected. And if Roe v. Wade is overturned, one of the things we need to do in the state of New Mexico is we need to abolish the criminalization of abortion law that sits on the books now. I know we all want to clap for that because we want to make that happen. But we also, I fully support full federal funding for Planned Parenthood, that Medicaid, women who are using Medicaid, they need to have access to the full range of services, and it shouldn't be limited to how much money you have. I am very proud that I am actually endorsed by Emily's List, I'm endorsed by NARAL, and these are the two organizations that are fighting for women's rights every day, and I'm so proud to be carrying their banner in this election.
I believe that elected officials should not be making healthcare decisions for any woman. I also believe that we need to remember that New Mexico has one of the highest pregnancy rates, and a lot of that has to do with our policies and not allowing our policies to really have other items than abstinence only in the curriculum. We are one of 5 who have a lot of the critical aspects of education that do not really get the truth about birth control, about sex education, about the consequences of abortions when you have to have one. But I think that you as women should have your own choices, and until women have a choice in their healthcare decisions with their leaders, with their families, and with the people that mentor them, we're never going to get to the point where we have equality when it comes to pay or any of the other ideas of equal rights for women, even though we're 50% of the population.
I am a fierce supporter, always have been and always will be, of women's choice. I have spoken pro bono across the country for Planned Parenthood because it's something I believe in passionately. It is choice. A woman's body is hers to control. And as a member of Congress, this is something I simply will never, ever compromise on.
So my position is a little different from everyone else's. I actually oppose late-term abortion. The way I look at it, I see if you have a healthy baby and a healthy mama at 8 or 9 months, I know we allow abortion up to birth right now, and I guess we're always getting this question asked at all the forums, and I'm always curious, what are the other candidates' positions on this? Like, do they support abortion up to birth? And that's my position, and I know I'm probably one of the few, if not the only one, that has this position. Thank you.
So I would absolutely advocate for a woman's right to her own healthcare decisions. I don't believe that men or women should be able to tell a woman on what she does with her body and how she treats her body. I think that nationally, Planned Parenthood has become the big boogeyman for the GOP and individuals who support that ideal. And let's recognize what Planned Parenthood does. Planned Parenthood provides STD checks, education, sex education, breast exams, annual Pap exams to millions of Americans in this country, and we need to make sure that not only is it protected, it's properly funded, and make sure that no one gets to tell a woman how she treats her body and her health issues, period.
So my position is that women should have autonomy over their body, period. And when you look at a lot of the efforts right now to take that access and control away, it is about asserting control upon women. It is about limiting opportunity, and it is about making sure that the power structures that be stay in place. And we cannot advance as a society with those same power structures in place. If the courts take away Roe v. Wade because of efforts to stack the judicial branch with radical judges, then it is the legislature's job to step in and ensure that that access and that right and control remains with women as it should be. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, again. I'm married for 15 years. I have 3 daughters, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And I really feel that having intercourse and sex is not to play games. And what I'm seeing in today's society and what you see on television, movies, it's becoming a game. And so as a result, the young people, they start thinking that it's okay just to have sex and to maybe, it's not a big deal to get pregnant. And see, that type of mentality needs to change. It needs to stop. Because that causes carelessness. And to me, that's what we need to understand. Because you got to look at the other side, their vision, their philosophy. Because the way they see is when a lady conceives, it's a gift from God. So we need to start understanding that as well. Thank you.
I am a proud feminist and plan to be a reproductive choice champion for everyone in this district when I get elected to Congress. I would absolutely support full funding. There's no question about that. People need to understand that these rights are currently under attack in this district. There are multiple county commissions in San Juan County that have been taking proactive action to limit a woman's right to choose. So this is not just a congressional issue, it's a state issue as well. Beyond that, the bigger issue that we have is that right now, wealthy women have access to choice, poor women don't. And so we need to ensure that regardless of income, everyone has access to choice. Beyond that, we need to do more about sex education. We need to have real sex education that teaches our young men and women what they need to do to protect themselves, whether they're straight or regardless of their sexual orientation, their gender identity. It needs to be meaningful for everyone. We need to ensure they have access to meaningful contraceptives. They are taught how to use it, why it's important, because we know that abstinence-only programs don't work.
I had several friends who were in the most recent lockdown at Santa Fe High due to the threat of a possible active shooter. I was terrified for my friends and enraged that this is something kids have to worry about on a daily basis. This has become all too familiar for people in our country. What actions will you take to shift this unfortunate norm for students, and what is your stance on limiting access to semi-automatic weapons? Answers will start with Laura Montoya.
Well, y'all should have been at the legislature today. He was very active on one of the legislative floors regarding some issues with our gun legislation. Last year, we had a piece of legislation that was to support background checks, and it almost failed. And I suggested an amendment to some of our legislators to not include family members or heirlooms, especially for those that have been before 1912. And everyone knows who's crazy in their household or their families, so you shouldn't be giving them one. But it's very similar to property taxes. If you have to pay or hotel, you go to a hotel and you have to pay taxes. At an Airbnb, you have to pay taxes. It's fair and equitable. The same way that when you go and you purchase a gun, you have to get a background check. And the same thing happens when you go and purchase it from someone else. You have to get a background check. So simple gun legislation that's going to protect New Mexicans is important. At the same time, we have to also be cognizant of those policies and what's within the underlining of the legislation to make sure that you don't impede on the Second Amendment.
Farrah? Oh, okay. So I think there's a national psychosis around this issue. We've gone so far from actually what is written in the Second Amendment. I would support an assault weapons ban, and I'm a proud supporter of New Mexicans Against Gun Violence. Those of you who know Miranda Viscoli and what her group has done in this state has been outstanding. There's higher rates of suicide in this rate and domestic violence, and the red flag laws are designed to tamp that down. But it's a much broader discussion. The NRA has now, because of the incredible amount of money that they pour into races across the states, it has distorted this discussion, and it seems like we can't speak in a civil manner to each other and pass responsible gun control laws.
So I grew up in rural New Mexico. We grew up hunting, ranching, and farming. Where I live, if you call the police, it could be 45 minutes before they get there. What you're going to see is, and you see it in the legislature, it's always a rural versus urban divide, and somehow we got to come up with some compromise where we can all agree. I know where I live, people believe in protecting themselves, and it's a huge deal. People believe in their Second Amendment rights. But we need to start at the elementary and high school level, where we have community schools where we're bringing counselors so we can start identifying red flags, like a kid, if he's being abused, if he's not getting a meal at night. These are all things that could trigger and set that young individual on the wrong path. So I think we really got to look at behavioral health, and that's where we got to start, at the root cause. Thank you.
First and foremost, I would encourage and support an assault, a ban rather, on assault weapons. I don't believe we need assault weapons to protect our homes. One thing that the NRA has done is they've made this a fear issue amongst gun owners. I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe that we need to educate gun owners. We need to have comprehensive background checks and ensure that the individuals who are getting guns are allowed to have them. In addition, we need to enforce the laws that we currently have in place. As a prosecutor, I see all too many times the result of guns falling into the wrong hands. So we need to ensure that those individuals aren't getting the guns, and unfortunately sometimes it falls through the cracks. Second, when it comes to domestic violence, I was a prosecutor for 5 years with domestic violence, and I can't tell you how many times I saw with repeat offenders who federally should not have had guns because they were a convicted domestic violence offender, still had guns the second, third, fourth time around. That's unacceptable.
Gun violence in this country is an epidemic. I am a father of 3 young kids, and when they go away to school, or even when I'm going away to the grocery store, it is simply flat out wrong that we have to worry about whether we're going to see our kids again, or whether our family has to worry when we're simply just going out to the movies or something like that. I support an assault weapons ban, which is also should include an ammunition ban. When the Republican Party allowed the assault weapons ban to lapse, you saw the rates of mass shootings proportionately increase. The statistics are there to tell us that the assault weapons ban works. We also need to do things like support increased background checks, waiting periods, and making sure that red flag laws are in place to ensure that the wrong people are not getting access to weapons. But assault weapons are not needed for hunting or for protecting one's home. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the Second Amendment that we have, you know, our forefathers had an idea how the mankind needs to protect themselves. But I think today we're abusing that amendment. You know, having these automatic weapons, that's overkill. You know, that's not. There's no need to have that. You know, having just a single shot Winchester 22, to me, that's sufficient enough. But it comes down to the family structure. That's how this needs to work. We had an incident in Aztec, New Mexico, 3 or 4 years ago, where we had a young kid go into the school and cause violence. And you find out that they had issues at the home. So it needs to start. We have too many single parents. We're dealing too much with drug abuse, methamphetamines. I mean, and then there's lack of jobs, and education is not affordable. So in order to change this, we need to bring more jobs to our areas as well. Keep people busy. Thank you.
This, for me, is an issue I take very seriously. The worst work day of my life was the day I had to call Martin Heinrich and tell him his friend Gabby Giffords had been shot and killed, because that's what the media first reported. That changed everything about the way I worked in the House of Representatives. It is offensive to me as someone who went to Santa Fe High that students today have to worry about this sort of thing. And that this year at Santa Fe Public Schools, before anyone learned chemistry or biology or English, they were taught how to run, hide, or fight from a potential gunman. That is unacceptable, and that cannot be the new normal in this country or in this state. I am outraged by this. We have to fight against the NRA that is sticking money in the pockets of these Republican members of Congress to deny that this is a problem and pretend it's not going to happen. And they only choose to care when one of their constituents is killed. That is not acceptable. The vast majority of New Mexicans and Americans support common sense reforms. Background checks, we will get that done. We will ban the weapons of war. They do not need to be on the street. Red flag laws, coordination between state, federal, local governments, and tribes. We're going to get this done if you support me.
The thing about this issue is that it is going to get done because it is correct. I agree with those of you up here who have noted that Americans believe in having the assault weapon ban, the background checks, the closing the loophole, the red flag laws. But it is the NRA, it is Mitch McConnell, it is certain Republicans, and it's those who I think I liked that when somebody said it's about fear. Because if we operate from a place of fear, then we are pitting each other against each other, and that is what's wrong. But what I think is going to happen is that it's student-led. It's student-led, right? Parkland. Here in New Mexico, I know my sons went on the walkout, and you guys have been with Amanda Viscoli participating in this, and it's our job as the elected officials that we will all someday be something, to really, really follow the lead of the students when they are saying, help, do something, and we must do it.
My grandfather is a farmer on the Pueblo of Santo Domingo. He grows corn, chili, squash, peaches, and apricots, selling his produce at the local Santa Fe Farmers Market. He has supported our family for generations in this way. Now with more big corporate competition each year, it becomes harder and harder to keep his farm alive. What would you do as a member of Congress to support local farmers like my grandfather? Answers will start with Valerie Plain.
Thank you. And I like that your grandfather's been doing that. I've been a supporter of the Santa Fe Farmers Market for just those reasons. It's part of our community. It's important that we reach out, we continue to provide them with the education. There's this wonderful educational program that the Farmers Market does. And we have to make sure that that remains such a vibrant part. Everyone loves going to the farmers market here in Santa Fe when the produce comes in. And it's just an important part of who we are. And this state is largely rural, and if we do not continue to protect those resources, the water sources, and to provide nurturing for them, that will be lost, and that will all be to our chagrin.
Thank you. So I think what we need to do is we need to encourage more farm to table to feed our schools, different places here in New Mexico. I come from Rio Arriba. It's actually the only county that's designated agriculture. And we talk about our farmers markets here in Santa Fe. A majority of that produce comes from Rio Arriba, where I'm from. I grew up farming. We picked peaches, apples. I don't know if anyone knows this, but the average age of the farmer in the United States is over 60 years old. We need to encourage more internships. I actually passed legislation to help pass internships that helps fund internships so we get more youth involved. It's a hard job. A lot of people don't want to do it. A lot of kids, we need to get them interested in that. I know Rio Arriba, we have many people that have been doing that for generations. My family's been doing it for generations. We just got to get people involved, and I think internships are the key, and I think we need to do more to get fresh organic produce to our schools and other places. Thank you.
This is a huge issue with rural New Mexico because not only are we seeing our farmers and ranchers get smaller and smaller, but our local businesses are suffering because there's not a proper infrastructure, but there's also not the subsidies or the tax breaks that small business in rural New Mexico deserves. When you have Amazon making $11 billion in profit a year, paying zero taxes, and small business owners like your grandfather, like my mother who's in the audience tonight, paying taxes, that's just not right. So first and foremost, subsidies and taxes for small business in rural New Mexico is required. Second, we need to encourage, and we have in rural, but encourage with programs, the internships, to ensure that our culture continues with our ranchers and our farmers, because it's the kids that are leaving because it's not a viable option. And that's why we need to encourage and need to give the resources so that we can maintain our culture and maintain that good food that's coming from up north and all around New Mexico. Thank you.
Try that. So this is an issue that is central to the future of New Mexico and the economic diversification of our state. Right now, there's billions upon billions of dollars in corporate subsidies that go to corporate farms. They do not come to family farms in New Mexico or rural parts of our state or rural parts of anywhere in the country. They go to, funding soybeans and corn in corporate manufactured farms. This is also central to building resilience within our state in the face of a warming planet. And I support turning those subsidy structures around so that we can support our family farms. Right now, the economic structures in our state basically would have a lot of the people who would do restoration agriculture in our communities for economic opportunity to go to our cities rather than stay home where they could grow food. So we need to make it easier for folks to stay where they are, and that helps to sequester carbon, but also build resilience within our communities, which is central.
Yeah, good evening. I'm president of the Nomination Farm Board, Sun River Farm Board, and what needs to happen to help these local farmers is we need funding to help improve their infrastructure. That's what needs to happen. Then we also need to work towards getting their product USDA and FDA certified so they can compete and get their products into these grocery stores. And then also make arrangements to be able to grow organically to where they can sell their product not just in the United States, but to China, to other countries, because the world right now needs food. We're all going to need food. And so to have this type of, and New Mexico is very unique because a lot of the Native Americans have their own traditional farms. And those farms have capabilities of also growing hemp and cannabis if you want to really generate funding for your community. And that's one thing I truly support. Thank you.
Woo! So when you drive across this district, you find that more towns than not, the only grocery store they have is a dollar store, and there are no vegetables or anything fresh in those communities. I think there's a real opportunity for whoever represents you in Congress to ensure that there is federal funding so that the cost of buying fresh fruits and vegetables, hopefully from the local, maybe from organic, maybe from someone else, it's a similar cost. Part of the issue right now too is with the Trump tax cuts and what's happened right now, a lot of New Mexicans are under a really tight budget, and a bag of Doritos is a heck of a lot cheaper than a bunch of kale, right? Like that's a real thing. And families don't necessarily have the ability to make the best healthy choices. They're trying to provide the most food for their families that they can, so Congress can step in there. I think there's absolutely an opportunity for us to require that public schools serve local, fresh meats and vegetables at school. When I was a student at Chaparral Elementary, ketchup was considered a vegetable. That's gross. We can't do that to our kids. There's also a huge opportunity here around climate to encourage farmers to also produce solar and wind and do it all in the same spot. Let's be creative.
So I think this question goes to what should New Mexico look like? And I think you're asking, we like this part of New Mexico and we want to save it, right? And I know this kind of what New Mexico should look like. I was an acequia commissioner fighting to keep the waters in our acequias when developers were trying to take them away because I knew that that water was so precious in that acequia. I'm still a parciante. And the New Mexico that we want it to look like has these thriving farms. So where does that money come from? I have done a lot of work trying to pull money out of that USDA because they have a lot of money. Who has the biggest building? After the Pentagon, it's the USDA. So we need to get that money and change it and funnel it into asking the question, does this help or hurt? And help goes not to just building those strong farms, but the regenerative agriculture. We need to help our farmers stay on their land and help us solve the climate crisis at the same time. Thank you.
I appreciate this question. My grandparents were farmers, and they used to do a lot of trading and you'd cross over to the next community to be able to sell or trade with one another. Whether it was firewood or fruits and vegetables, and my dad is a rancher. There's a couple of things that I think are really important about this question. So there's the educational aspect. We need to have trades in the school, which include farming and ranching. You need more tax incentives and better subsidies because we don't have enough money actually coming in to help our farmers or ranchers. For example, a bale of hay is now $8, but if you are dry with water and you can't get your bales of hay, you have to actually drive really far, like Valencia County, to get them, which now takes it to $12 per bale of hay. So making sure that those subsidies are really substantive. Water sustainability, waters of the United States, now that legislation has just really downwindled since Trump got in there, and our waters are not protected the way that they were before, especially for smaller bodies of water, which is a Sequia Day tomorrow.
I've experienced sexual health education. I have experienced sexual health education where there has been a lack of reliable resources and pure misinformation. With this in mind, because we live in a minority-majority state, how would you make the public schools sexual health education curriculum more comprehensive and culturally responsive? Answers will start with Representative Joseph Sanchez.
Thank you. That's a great question. Education is really important. I think when you're young, a lot of the stuff, you don't know which direction to go. Relationships are important. You need to learn at a young age just how to handle it. And I think those types of educations that you're talking about are really important because if we're not reaching our kids at a young age, we're going to have kids that are getting pregnant at a young age. We're going to have kids that get into abusive relationships. So we really need to educate our kids how to handle different situations so they can avoid those cases.
This is such an important question because it reinforces the fact that we need to protect funding for Planned Parenthood and programs like Planned Parenthood, but ensure that the systems in place in our schools are available to our students, readily available, and are comprehensive. I can tell you when I was a kid, there was a lot of fear in the sex education that we got. That's not right. We need to make sure that we allow these students the opportunity to say, if I'm going to do this, how can I do this in a healthy manner, in a protected manner? Because we can't control what our kids do. We can't control what anybody does, but we can provide them with the resources that they make the best possible decisions, and that's the type of education curriculum I would encourage, that I would attempt to fund as your next congressman. Thank you.
So I think it has to start with telling kids the truth. And so much about sex education is directed towards creating a certain narrative around what is the right choice, what is the wrong choice, and what we're not doing is being honest with our kids about the choices that they are making, whether they're hearing about it in school or whether they're talking about it with their friends. So we need to trust our young people and tell them the truth so that they have access to information to make their own informed choice about how they want to treat their bodies and what that means in terms of their own autonomy and the autonomy and choice of other people who they would engage with.
I'm trying to debate this right now because, you know, I've grown with the old school, with my ancestors. Well, I have grandparents that have lived almost over 90 years old, and I think they lived a good life. And they, you know, they had a husband for over 50 years. And during that time, you know, they never really were, you know, they were taught that, you know, you don't talk about sex. But now we're in this generation, you know, you know, we need to start, they're saying we need to start telling our kids about sex and so forth. So as a Native American, it conflicts with how I believe things this should go. But I do believe in today's society with competing against movies and television and whatever, the social media, Facebook, there needs to be enough capital and funding right now to educate the people the right way of what sex is all about. Thank you.
So there's a few things here. First of all, we have to use data and science with students. They are adults, they understand what's going on. Framing it for a certain agenda of abstinence only doesn't work, we know that. When I was at Santa Fe High, we had classmates who got pregnant. It doesn't work. You can't force that on kids. We actually have to have actual contraceptives or contraception available to students. If they have it, if they understand how it works, if it is available to them, they will use it. If we hide it from them and make it hard where they have to sneak $10 from their parents to run to the store to try to buy it, that doesn't work. And so what we're guaranteeing in that scenario is that students are going to get STDs, they're going to get pregnant, and they're going to be put into even tougher situations to make bad choices. A part of this has to be, I'm on the board of an organization in Albuquerque that is called Casa Q that provides housing to LGBTQ youth. Many of these students who are not binary, they're non-binary, they're trans, they fit somewhere on the spectrum. This is the first time in their life they've been given sexual health that fits their needs, not the school's needs. We have to do that for everyone.
So this question, I think, goes to, you were asked about sex education, but I think that what we need to think about is that we need to not kind of isolate this into one class, right? But that we need to talk about the respect that women and men and women and women and men and binary, whatever it is that a student is choosing to do in terms of the exploration of that student's own sexuality needs to be understood and taught, but also not segregated. That's what I'm kind of worried about, is that if we just say it only happens in the sex education class and isn't a thread in terms of how the whole school works, this whole idea of respect that goes through the whole school. I also think it's very important that we make sure that there's a good understanding for both boys and girls about what consent means. And that kind of respect for each other's decisions and their decision to say no or their decision to say yes, and that sons are taught to respect and protect.
Okay, I'm going to talk fast. So sexual education needs to be realistic, including and honest. Birth control. Everybody thinks birth control is because you're having sex. That is not the case. Birth control can also be because you need to regulate your periods or because you're in a lot of different sports and other issues that go on. But nobody's very honest about it. And in New Mexico, abstinence-only education needs to go away. You need to be able to talk realistic about the consequences of your decisions, the unintended consequences of your decisions, and the realism of being able to and when you have sex. So services for teen pregnancy also need to be available and realistic to access. Stop allowing the media to advertise their products with women as sexual objects. And that adds to the empowering women to be strong and bold and confident. I want to make it really clear because we have a lot of young women here. I am absolutely pro-choice, but I also worked in a treatment facility, and I know the consequences sometimes and the decisions of an abortion and how it could negatively impact you, and sometimes you need some extra help or services to get through that process. And so it's an option, but there are several other options available beforehand that can help to guide you, and your leaders and your
Laura.
friends will help. Thank you.
It strikes me that as Americans, we're so schizophrenic on this issue. On one hand, pornography is readily available, the internet. On the other hand, there's a lot of curriculums that promote abstinence only. How is a young person supposed to make sense of that? As a mother of a son and a daughter, you can be sure as they were growing up, I was giving them both the same information, as Teresa was saying, about consent, particularly young women having agency over their own bodies and understanding what those consequences are. I believe sunlight is the best disinfectant. The more information that we trust with our young people, the better the results.
At my school, we have been making an effort to limit our plastic waste. We have changed from styrofoam plates to paper plates and have increased our recycling. And we're just teenagers. Last week, I learned that China has nationally banned single-use plastic, including plastic bags and straws. What actions will you take to ban single-use plastics in the United States? Answers will start with Marco Cerna.
Thank you. I think this, well, one, I would be in favor of eliminating plastic bags throughout the United States. We are in a global crisis right now, and this directly touches on the Green New Deal and what it stands for. And so my position on the Green New Deal has always been, I love the idea of it, but I can't support it as it stands right now, because for New Mexico purposes, we can take bold action, but we need to be responsible in how we take that action. Oil and gas is a revenue source that our state relies upon, and we pigeonholed ourselves upon that reliance. And luckily, last year, we were able to pass a bill through our governor and our great legislators that imposes a 30-year program that ushers out fossil fuels and brings in green new energy technology and investment. So I think that this is the time that we need to be responsible, but also recognize that we need to be bold in this approach. Thank you.
So globally, we are past our carrying capacity many times over. And so this really becomes a question not only of how do we eliminate waste, but how do we live in a more sustainable way. I want to caution us, though, not to get stuck into a narrative between individual choice and sacrifice and what really is about the systemic change that needs to be made to live within our carrying capacity on this planet. Yes, we need to eliminate plastic waste. That is one portion of a much broader systemic problem that has us living in a way that is beyond our Earth's carrying capacity and is leading us down to a future where we are not going to have a livable planet for ourselves or for future generations. So this becomes about how do we link these issues together and create the type of systemic, true change that we need to see. Thank you.
Okay, now está Mother Nature, Mother Earth. Right now, the way I see it, we need to move forward with hemp production. In this district, we have the land and we have the water. And if we can produce large quantity of hemp, we can produce, well, instead of having plastic bottles, you have hemp bottles. Instead of sitting here with plastic, with these tables here, it'd be made out of hemp. And see, that, as your congressman, that's what I'm going to push for, is production of hemp. That's what's going to help save Mother Earth. That's going to help cure Mother Earth, because hemp can also remove uranium. And that's the thing that we need to understand, is that when I become congressman, that's what we're going to push for, is we're going to make sure we're going to help with the industry by growing hemp and to produce at large volume, because that will provide jobs, opportunity, and it's a medicine. And it's a medicine for mankind and for Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you for all you guys are doing in school. I started a recycling program at Santa Fe High, so I think that's super awesome. That's great. I am the sort of nerd, much to my husband's dismay, that I bring a water bottle with me everywhere, even to an airport, to refill when I get through security. So there's small things we can do for sure, but that won't solve the problem. There are things that we need to be doing at the congressional level to do that. You know, one of the real concerns is that in the not very distant future, there will be more pieces of plastic than fish and marine mammals in the ocean. That's scary. Even if we don't live near the ocean, imagine that. And so the National Resource Defense Council, NRDC, put out a study a couple years ago saying that the federal government spent some $22 to $23 billion, with a B, incentivizing the fossil fuel industry. Now, I would tell you, I think they're doing pretty good and they don't need that money, right? That is something that Congress can redirect that funding to ensure that municipalities can afford to hire people to do recycling locally, and that we can invest in the technologies that will allow us to get away from using this sort of throwaway plastic.
So, I don't know, we kind of like, I like your husband, there we go. So I have been really trying to not use the single-use plastic bottles, and you know, we just tend to just bring them out again and again. But I agree that this idea of moving individually, moving at a school-wide, moving at a national level to ban things, we've done good in Santa Fe, it's happening in lots of other places. But I think that's part of it is there are technologies that will come up that we can use that do not depend on fossil fuels for plastic or other things. But until we regulate and say we're not going to do it, or regulate or refuse, that will then innovate. Regulation will innovate. And then the other thing we do is when we go to Washington, I want to put that lens on again that says, are we spending the money on solving the problem or are we exacerbating it? So yes, I agree. The solving the problem is redirect the money to renewable energy, to the kind of technologies that are going to move away from fossil fuels and stop the subsidies for fossil fuels now.
So I'm Mexican, so nothing doesn't not get recycled at least once, especially plastic bags. So there's 100 billion single-use cups that are disposed globally. I think all of us can do our bit to help out. I was in high school and we had these people come over and they showed us that a aluminum can had 3 hours worth of electric light. And ever since then, I can't throw away aluminum cans. I really think that we need to teach the fundamental root in our educational system, in our curriculum, about the importance of recycling, the importance of picking up after yourself, the importance of taking care of our environment for the future. The shirt's the future. There are other types of eco-friendly alternatives that are absolutely critical to utilize, and governments and big corporations can be doing this with their procurement code. Right now, I'm very proud as the Sandoval County Treasurer, we're the first ones in the state of New Mexico to have solar panels on our county building. It saves money and it helps save energy.
I'm so irritated when I get takeout in styrofoam, right? Because you know that you're just adding to that big pile of trash. Who knows quite where it goes? So I would love to see, for starters, those really smart people up at Los Alamos National Lab figure out at more economically feasible, compostable takeout containers that would replace the billions of pounds of plastic that are put out into our environment every single year. But it speaks to a larger question of what everyone has spoken to here, which is protecting our environment. I used to think that there was just one existential threat, and I spent my adult life on it, which was nuclear weapons. There's two now, and because I've got two kids, they bend my ear on it all the time, and it's climate change. We here in New Mexico are so well positioned to take advantage of renewable energy and become the leaders in this, exporting technology, sun and wind. I would love to see that.
Thank you. I think we need to start with educating our society to reuse first and recycle second. I think that's a huge thing. I know I used to run a co-op where I had over 100 employees, and it costs more to recycle than it did just to throw the trash. That's crazy. We got to come up with recycling facilities that are more efficient, more convenient, cost-effective. We can talk about switching to paper, but then we're cutting trees. We can talk about switching to hemp. Hemp's amazing. I hope we move to hemp, but the thing with hemp, it takes a lot of water, It doesn't take as much water as other things, but we got to remember New Mexico, if we're thinking about New Mexico, has the least amount of surface water in the Southwest. These are all things we got to consider, so it's not just a simple approach. I'm an engineer. I think about all these things, and when I think about things, I think from all aspects. It's about solving problems, so we got to look at it from all aspects.
Joe, we need to sit down and talk.
Throughout my education, I have been part of the Santa Fe public school system, and I've personally experienced the teacher shortage. I went a whole semester without a health teacher last year, and believe me, I did not learn anything in that class. Senators Kane and Collins have introduced the Preparing and Retaining Educational Professionals Act. How would you work to move this bill or a similar one forward in Congress to address the teacher shortage in New Mexico? Answers will start with Kyle Tisdale.
So I'm the son of a public school teacher, so I know how hard teachers work, and it's, they should get more than just the summers off. The truth is that the funding sources right now for our public schools are disproportionately held within communities, right? And so we need to equalize funding streams so that our rural communities are not at such a disadvantage in terms of our funding sources. The federal government also has a role to play in increasing funding and equitability within both urban and rural places within the state. And we also need to create incentive structures so that we can attract teachers to communities that are underserved, and making sure that those access to education, which is really about creating opportunity for our kids and growing a middle class going forward into the future.
So, can you repeat that question, please?
Senator Kane and Collins have introduced the Preparing and Retaining Educational Professionals Act. How would you work to move this bill or a similar one forward in Congress to address the teacher shortage in New Mexico?
Well, first of all, I come from a community in Shiprock, New Mexico, where it's a small town. Growing up, we had a lot of good teachers, and guess what happened? They go there for 2-3 years, and they get attracted to a border town, like Farmington, New Mexico, or Gallup, New Mexico, because of the amenities, because of the healthcare system, because they get to, there's more amenities there outside than what's on where I'm from. And so for myself is that it comes down to capital and funding and infrastructure of a community. That needs to be in place. That way we'll be able to keep our teachers and keep our professionals there in these rural areas. And as congressman, that's what I'm going to push for, because this district, not every place is like Santa Fe. There's rural area, a lot of, we're in a rural area here. And what I'm standing for is what needs to be done. Thank you.
So first of all, I'm the proud son of an educator. My dad, Bill Blair, worked at PED for 32 years. My sister is a teacher. My aunts are teachers. This is a big deal for me. We have to continue strengthening our public schools so that we keep our societal promise of a really quality pre-K through 12 education for every student in New Mexico, regardless of their zip code or how much money their family makes. And a big portion of that is about treating teachers like the professionals that they are. And that means they have to be paid what they're worth. We saw a big step forward in the legislature this last year in increasing teacher salaries. My sister's been teaching for, I think, almost 25 years, and it's still tough for her to raise her son and her daughter. We're in a place that the salaries are a big component of it, particularly for communities all across this district. We have a real problem with affordable housing. And so if teachers can't afford to live in the community, how are they going to teach there? We have an issue around safe schools and safe streets and making sure that New Mexico is a safe place to raise a family. But so there's not one thing, there are many things we have to do.
So I think we need to increase teacher pay, but I think we have to both increase pay and increase praise, right? Because we don't praise the role that teachers do enough. Instead, in terms of thinking about what the federal government does, what the federal government has done in the past with this, the No Child Left Behind, was a series of tests and assessments that really had nothing to do with increasing the ability of that teacher to figure out, how can I better serve this student? How can this better serve me so that I can learn better how to serve? No, they were tests and tests and tests. So I think we're getting rid of that, and we're going to get rid of Secretary Voss, and that's going to do a lot. But also, I think that HomeWise, I was part of HomeWise, chair of HomeWise, when we actually did help with Santa Fe Public Schools of getting affordable housing for our teachers. I also come from a teacher, and she loved the miracle she saw every time a child learned to read. So we need to allow our teachers to experience that miracle.
So in New Mexico, we have finally started to value our teachers. This last year was 6% increase, and 3% is expected, or 4% this next legislative session. So what is it that we value? Well, if I'm your congresswoman, I'll make sure that I research who in Congress is an educator, who has family that is an educator, and have them help sponsor my bill. I have 13 brothers and sisters that my mom has, but 13 brothers and sisters. All the sisters are teachers, including my mother. So they can be your best lobbyists. And then I would assess the budget and the tax reform, because you have to reallocate your funds so that you can start valuing your teachers. And you have to make sure that it's not just on salaries for teachers. Teachers complain because they have too many students in their classroom that they can't really have an impact on, and they don't have enough support, not just in supplies for their kids, because it really is an act of Congress to get supplies to the classroom, but it's also being able to make sure that those teachers have support from the parents, and that there's some type of support system with a lot of the things that kids struggle with outside of the classroom.
It's sometimes said, oh, you just can't keep throwing money at this problem. Well, I would put forward to you that we've never given it enough money. It's always been underfunded. We're 49th in the nation in child well-being. If we want to attract entrepreneurs to the state, if we want to retain our young people, diversify our economy, education and the money, the funding that goes to it is absolutely crucial. Your next congresswoman should be able to get those resources and bring them back here to New Mexico. I was fortunate to have served on with the United Way of Santa Fe County for years, and I saw they really moved the needle on early childhood education. And I want to see more girls in STEM, because that is where we need to go as well. And we need to look at education holistically, not just early childhood education, but K through 12, and then through university, as well as vocational training.
Thank you. I actually have a sister that's a teacher in the audience right now. I'm a legislator right now. I actually helped pass legislation to increase the budgets for schools over $400 million. I voted to increase teachers' raises. So I'm already doing in action what people are talking about here on the stage. I'm doing that. We got to pay them adequately. We're still not paying them enough. We got to do more. And the other thing we got to do is we need to make sure we provide them the resources they need. I don't know how many times I've seen my sister go to Walmart to buy pencils, staplers, and other things for her students. I know this year we're trying to put more money to pay for those supplies, so we're trying to solve that issue, but it's something we got to keep doing. And the last thing I would recommend is, we have a teacher shortage. Why don't we give teachers free college? We just got to make sure we keep them in that profession. If they agree to stay there for X years, like, let's pay for their school. That's what I would propose.
How cool would it be if we treated our teachers and our students proportionate to how we treat our military funding? We would be out of this issue. We wouldn't even have an issue with regard to proper education, teacher recruitment and retention, admin recruitment and retention, curriculums for all walks of life, trade schools in our rural communities, schools here in Santa Fe and throughout New Mexico to teach, to deal with the movie industry. We need to focus on our teachers and our students, because for far too long we've missed the boat. And that's why, as a state and as a nation, we're at the bottom of the list. So that's what I would do as your next congressman. Thank you.
For our final question, if you could go back in time and give your teenage self some advice, what would it be? Answers will start with Danae Benali.
Advice is being a teenager? I'm thinking back. I don't think I even was a teenager. No, I'm just kidding. I think the advice I would give is to enjoy the moment, because life is short. Life is very, very short. And right now, I could not even imagine being a Navajo, Native American from Shiprock, New Mexico, being up here running for Congress. And being 44 years old, it just seems like yesterday I was running around along the San Juan River and having a good time. So, what I ask is, as young people, enjoy the moment, enjoy your friends, enjoy your family, be respectful, love your grandparents, love your parents, because life is short. You won't be around too long. It goes by quick. Thank you.
Sorry, they're hogging the microphones. This is hard for me. I was living in the closet when I was in high school, kids today, it's such a different world. But I think what I would tell myself would be to truly, genuinely embrace what makes you different, because that's what makes you fascinating and interesting when you're older. And there's such pressure to fit in and be like everybody else, but it really is that sort of difference. I was president of the band. I mean, come on, people, right? That was not cool. Right? So you agree, that's great. But, don't be afraid to try new things. I wish that I knew that love is love, and I wish that I had watched a little bit less TV and read a few more books.
Wow. So I actually had to think about this because I gave a commencement speech when my son graduated. And so I was thinking about, well, what do you tell a high school student, right? And I thought about this, is that, so the advice I gave them, which was in a sense, I think the advice I was trying to give myself, was everybody always says, follow your passion, find your passion. And I thought, well, not all of us know what our passion is, right? We don't know when we're teenagers and we're exploring. I knew I wanted to make a difference. I knew I wanted to have an impact. I came from a family of, oh my God, my parents, they helped change New Mexico. They did the Multicultural Education Act. They were amazing. So I knew that I wanted to follow in their steps, but I didn't know how. So I think the advice I gave then was, you might not know what your passion is, but do whatever you do with passion. Find the joy and the passion in whatever you do, and then it'll all work out fine.
Do you. Stop sweating the small stuff. Focus on embracing the beauty of who you are as a person. I was very big and compared to everyone else, and I was in volleyball, basketball, track, all the sports, size 10 foot, very awkward looking. It didn't matter. At the end of the day, if you do you embrace the beauty of who you are, you work hard with determination no matter what, no matter how many people tell you no, you just keep moving one step forward, you're going to be able to get it done. And at the end of the day, you can help to create history. This race is so critical. New Mexico has a great opportunity to be able to have the first Latino woman to ever represent us in District 3, the first state in the United States to have all of our congressional delegation be women of color, to be sent to Washington, D.C. to represent us in New Mexico. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to do me.
As a teenager, I worried much too much of what other people thought. And my mother would say to me, no one's paying attention. And she was absolutely right. And I wish I had given myself that freedom. That's one thing. I wish I had tried more things. Maybe that came from a certain inhibition of what will people think? Why don't I try out for the school play or whatever it was, to try more things. And then finally, I would encourage my teenage self to ask more questions. You don't want to look silly But I turned out I got a lot of mileage from my career by asking, why do you do that like that? And, no one thinks less of you, and you'd be surprised at the answers that come. The Girls Inc. is to be strong, smart, and bold, and those words sum up what you are doing, and what you need to do to go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. My advice would be don't be so shy. I'm an engineer. My first mentor was D.G. Willerall. She was an engineering manager. She would make me go to Toastmasters because she saw I was so quiet. Take advantage of speaking to as many people and meeting as many people as possible. I was also a band geek and a band nerd. I'm proud of it. I was a cool nerd, a quiet cool nerd. But the thing is, I went from doing that to becoming an engineering manager to running a $100 million company to now running for Congress. So just know, anything you set your mind to, chase those dreams. You could go from a quiet person to running for Congress, and I know a lot of you young women here are very fortunate to have this great opportunity. I'm so excited you're doing this because a lot of other areas that I visited and where I'm from, they don't have those opportunities, so take advantage of the mentorships. My first mentor was the greatest. Thank you.
You play a mean sax, buddy. I think listening, and if you're anything like me, you're not going to listen to this, but definitely listening to your parents because they're smarter than you think. Listening to your teachers, rather, because they have your best interest at heart, but also listening to each other and yourselves. I have a twin brother who's an amazing, amazing person, and he also grew up in the closet, and I didn't listen. And if I would have been able to help him out with so many issues that he was going through, and I would have been a great support system as a twin brother, which I thought I was, but I wasn't. Because I wasn't listening. So listen to yourself, listen to your loved ones, and I think it'll take you far. But don't do what I did, because I didn't listen.
So here's the truth. When I was a teenager, I was living under an entirely different set of assumptions and beliefs than I think the youth today are living under, right? There was still the assumption that we would have a livable planet that we could inherit. There was still an assumption that we could have a better economic standard of living and a better opportunities than our parents had before them. And that is entirely different than the youth are dealing with today, right? We are dealing with an existential crisis that exists such that the youth today might not have a livable planet to inherit. And the choices that we're making now are critical towards whether that will come to pass or not. So the advice that I would give myself when I was a teenager would be, get out in the streets and start organizing now when the Kyoto Protocol was being wiped away. And make sure that if I did a better job organizing when I was a teenager, maybe we wouldn't be dealing with the mess that we're dealing with right now.
Now, Erin will read some of the audience's questions. So that we can get through as many questions as possible, candidates will have 30 seconds to answer.
Hello everyone, my name is Erin Murphy. I am from the Pueblos of Acoma and Laguna. I attend Santa Fe Indian School as a freshman. We will have 3 questions from the audience. Our first question is, how will you protect our LGBTQ students in our schools? Answers will start with John Blair.
Why me? No, I'm kidding. So first of all, we have to make sure that schools are safe places for all children, regardless of what they look like, their race, who they love, how they identify. It has to be a safe place. We need to we need to pass the Safe Schools Act to make sure that kids are not getting bullied. There is a crisis of young people committing suicide, oftentimes because of their sexual orientation. And it used to be when I was a kid, I got bullied at school, but I went home and I was safe. Now with the internet and texting and tweeting, it goes with you everywhere. So we have to protect our kids.
I agree. We have to absolutely protect our kids. We have to also recognize that we cannot let this idea of demonizing an other take over in the school or in our politics, which is what has happened, right? Where right now we're demonizing what you're LGBTQ, we're demonizing other people for power. Instead, we need to lift them up and say, let us celebrate this, because it's in the celebration of our differences that we really will grow and thrive.
I would really ask our educators to help us in the educational aspect outside of the classroom of embracing our diversity. So it's not just LGBTQ, it's our color, our race, your size 10 feet versus everyone else's small feet. It's really the idea of respecting one another and treating each other with kindness, because we all have big struggles on our shoulders already, whether it's at home or in the classroom, that we really need to support each other instead of being hurtful towards one another.
I am heartened because my children have grown up in a much more accepting environment here in Santa Fe, where this is no big deal, and it's perfectly normal to have LGBTQ students transitioning, questioning their gender. So this has to be broadened, and to the point where the stigma no longer is there. And as others have said, to embrace our diversity. And our sexuality is just a piece of it, of who we are, and stop stigmatizing the other.
Thank you. I think that everyone should be treated with respect and dignity, and no one should be judged for who they are. I know we need to educate society on this issue. We really got to enforce and make sure anti-bully laws are placed or enforced. I know I was bullied when I was in junior high. I grew up, I guess 15 seconds. I grew up in a place where it was tough. I grew up in the Espanola Valley, and I think it's about education and just teaching people to treat people with respect. Like I said, if I had a superpower, it'd be to make sure that we could have people get along and educate people.
I think we need to create community centers for the LGBTQ plus community in the entire state, the entire country for that matter. I've seen firsthand the bullying that goes on with cases that come to my office for so many other reasons, but that is one of the main reasons. In San Juan County, there's Identity Inc., and it is the only community center, LGBTQ plus community center in our state. That's unacceptable, especially here in Santa Fe. So that's what I would make sure, that we have these community centers where kids can go and talk to each other and have that support system.
So love comes in so many different shapes and forms and sizes. And I think what we really need to do is work on an atmosphere of acceptance and education, and making sure that what we are teaching our young people are what healthy relationships look like, no matter what form that might take and what choices someone might have, or what someone's orientation might be. And so we need to institute that at the very core of who we are as a society and a culture.
Thank you. Yeah, we need to work on really improving and strengthening our family home structure, and to have our people and our community not separate each other, but to come together and to understand that we are all God's creatures, and that we all need to love one another, and we all need to support one another, because that's what we are as humankind. We're going to need to stop this segregation. It needs to stop. And if to really get down to it, plain and simple, I would have officers at those schools and to enforce, and no bullying and no calling names and so forth.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question is, what will you do to provide more affordable housing? Answers will start with Teresa Ledger Fernandez.
Well, I love this question because I've been working on affordable housing for the last 21 years. So the importance of affordable housing, it is how we build our assets. So when somebody owns their home, that is how they build their assets and pass that on. So there are lots of programs that we have been underfunding right now through HUD. We need to increase all of the programming for HUD, and the best way is like what HomeWise does. I would urge you all to go to the HomeWise website, and you can see that through that we can do all kinds of subsidies to help people get into homes, even in a place like Santa Fe.
So I think part of affordable housing also is if you have a house to be able to keep it. One of the bills that I helped to get passed this year, legislators aren't the only ones that can get bills passed. We use our legislators to help, right? So being able to help with affordable housing would be, for example, the senior value free. So if you're 65 years of age and older and you make over under 35,000 of income, you can qualify for a value freeze, which will help you to keep your house, especially here. And you have your 3% cap, which is on all of your head of household in primary residence in the state of New Mexico.
So we just passed a $738 billion defense budget. Imagine what we could do with just taking a teeny fraction of that and apply it toward things that we all care about in our communities. Homelessness, affordable housing, it's priorities. It's priorities, folks. A lot of studies have shown that when you're dealing with the root causes of problems in our society, getting people in homes first can help you take care of the rest of the things that follow.
I think gentrification has been a huge issue, and currently there's some legislation protecting against that. We need to make sure that taxes aren't raised when homes are sold to next door neighbors, and raising taxes on people, then they can't afford to keep their houses and they lose their houses. We need to make sure we provide tax incentives for affordable housing. And again, these are things that I've supported in the legislature as a state rep, and I will continue to support, so I'm already doing these things. Thank you.
Ultimately, it comes down to resources. Unfortunately, here in Santa Fe, the cost of living is so high, majority of our teachers, our first responders, attorneys in my office can't even afford to live here. So it comes down to resources and prioritizing to allow individuals to stay within their communities, especially if they're serving in those communities. I don't think that's right that, you know, our teachers for our children are driving in from Albuquerque or Rio Rancho because they can't even afford rent in Santa Fe.
So this gets down to a sort of fundamental issue of how we build resilience within our communities, and having access to housing and our ability to grow that wealth within our communities is central to how we are going to address many of the fundamental issues that we have going forward. So I think this is about how we grow wealth within families, but it's also about access to lending and borrowing and making sure that we are building that wealth within our communities.
Basically, we need to work in making sure we have jobs in these areas in our communities. We need to create jobs. That way the people can afford homes. And then looking at investing in companies like Restore, into reusing items, materials that are, and to stop over-regulating, inspecting these homes. And also develop subdivision areas where the working people can buy homes, where they can create a living and build a strong family. And also have a self-contained facility where we can drill wells and have solar energy. Thank you.
So there's three things that come off the top of my head. The first is we need some greater flexibility with zoning laws within municipalities. This housing crisis is in Santa Fe, it's in Portales, it's in Los Alamos, it's in Farmington, it's everywhere. Second, the federal government has the capacity to lead with a carrot or a stick. It used to be that states didn't get federal funding for freeways unless they lowered the speed limit to 65. We could do things like that to encourage or force municipalities to do the right thing. And then we have to address what's going to be looming student debt for many of you when you go to college.
Thank you, candidates. Our final question is, what would you do to help Congresswoman Holland address the serious issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women? Answers will start with Laurel Montoya.
I would love to help co-sponsor her piece of legislation that helps with this. I would also try to make sure that we visit all of our different pueblos and our Navajo Nation, Navajo chapters throughout the state of New Mexico so that we can continue to have the conversation and also be able to have resources that are available for the families that are going through a lot of these challenges that have occurred.
Congresswoman Holland has done an extraordinary job of bringing attention to this issue that has been festering right under our noses for decades and decades. Searchlight New Mexico just did a wonderful investigative piece on trafficking that happens on the Navajo Nation. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. We need to understand what is happening in our communities and make sure that this comes to an end. It's an absolute genocide, and it's just coming to light now, which is immoral.
So last session, my priority bill was House Bill 16, which required the Department of Public Safety to report missing persons to a national database. I passed this legislation for a Native American from Okiawinga whose brother went missing. So like I keep saying, I'm already putting things into action. I'm already legislating. That was extremely important. Who would have thought that that wasn't already a requirement? But that passed. That was the first bill that got passed the House of Representatives last year. I did that as a new representative. Thank you.
I'm happy to say as district attorney, I've actually been working on this issue since I began. We got with our local pueblos in the Apache Nation up north in Dulce to discuss this issue. And the fact of the matter is, we don't have the proper data. People haven't been taking the data on this, so this is what Representative Holland has been working on, and I encourage her to work on it because it's so necessary. We attended a summit in San Juan County, and they had the pictures of these missing women on the wall, and I can't tell you how much that impacted me since I've been working on this.
So there is a direct relationship between trafficked women and violence against women and the fact that New Mexico is an energy colony for big oil and gas. And so to address this issue, we need to address a lot of the issues with where these man camps are set up, jurisdictional gaps that exist between federal, state, and tribal police forces and prosecution, and we need to make sure that there is appropriate resources in our communities to be able to deal with that and get our women and girls back.
When I become your congressman, one thing I want to push for, right now, I don't understand right now what our leaders are in position. People are being stolen, they're being taken across borders. You know, they're treating like mankind, humankind is not valuable. It's valuable. And what needs to happen? They need to call in the National Guard. They need to call in the FBI. Don't just send one person out there. Call the military. We're spending $1 trillion military. This can be solved if they just move on it quickly. Thank you.
We need a new Democratic president, whoever he or she may be, who will appoint U.S. attorneys and judges who will prioritize these cases and make sure that they are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. There's a role for Congress to provide additional funding. There is an issue right now with information sharing and jurisdictional issues across state, tribal, federal, and local jurisdictions and how they share information. And unfortunately, sometimes these women are being lost across that paradigm. Beyond that, as a member of Congress, I would use my microphone to ensure that these issues are at the forefront of what the communities are talking about.
So this is a jurisdictional problem. What we have is that the way the law is now, tribal courts cannot prosecute men who are not Native, who commit crimes against Native American women. And then the U.S. Attorney's offices have not been willing to investigate and prosecute those other. So that's what it needs to get fixed, and that's what is in those bills, because if they are not being protected, they become prey. We need to make sure that Native American women and that all women are protected from this kind of persecution and murder.
Thank you, candidates.
Now each candidate will have the opportunity to make a closing statement. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your closing statements, and we'll start with Valerie Plame.
Thank you. I come before you, my community, this evening to respectfully ask for your consideration for the honor of serving you in Congress. My life, experiences, and skills make me the best candidate for New Mexico. I've lived and worked all over the world, bringing together people of different cultures and backgrounds for a common purpose to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. I've been a wife, raised my twins in New Mexico, a mentor to many, and a loyal friend. I've helped elect Democratic candidates up and down the ballot. I was called a liar and a traitor by the Bush White House and a glorified secretary by a member of Congress because I had the guts to push back against their lies that took us to war in Iraq. I didn't back down from the Bush administration. I will never stop fighting for the people of New Mexico. I believe public service is a moral and sacred duty to be carried out with integrity and honesty, and electing those who believe likewise is the only way our beleaguered democracy will survive.
Thank you, Valerie.
I'd be honored to earn your support.
Thank you. As an electrical engineer, there's a lot of attorneys up here. I've said this before, how many more attorneys do we need in Congress? They're very smart people, and I'll give them that. But my background, I have the education, I have an MBA, I understand budgets, I run a $100 million co-op, I've pushed renewable projects. I'll be the energy policy expert from day one in Congress. Nobody has my experience. I ran the largest electrical utility co-op in the state. I did that successfully. I turned them around. They were going into bankruptcy. When I left them, they were in the best financial condition they had ever been in. That's what I bring. I'm also a legislator. I have experience passing policy. I have experience appropriating. I even funded a homeless shelter, the first homeless shelter in Espanola. These are things I care about. We need to lift our people. Poverty, addiction, infrastructure. These are the things we need to work on.
Thank you again, Girls Inc., and thank you to all of you who set this up. I can tell you, you guys inspired me to be strong here tonight, so I appreciate that. My name is Marco Cerna. I'm the district attorney, and I ran because I care about my community. Growing up in Espanola, I saw the issues with our opioid epidemic, and I wanted to address it. And luckily, I was fortunate to run, and that's what I made my passion as the district attorney, to address that with diversion programs. I take that same passion for you all to Congress. Economic development, veteran services, making sure that Social Security and Medicare are protected from this president, ensuring that education is getting the proper funding that it deserves, making sure that we have the proper infrastructure, that our small businesses are getting the tax benefits, not the big corporation. My name is Marco Cerna. I respectfully ask for your vote. I hope to earn your support. Thank you.
So here's the truth. I didn't grow up aspiring to become a politician, right? So I've built my career as a public interest environmental attorney, fighting for people and communities and holding our federal government and the oil and gas industry accountable to the science and the timeline of the climate crisis. This is the last election that we have to be able to make the meaningful type of change to preserve a livable planet for future generations. There is no sitting Democrat in this state who has had the courage to take on the oil and gas industry, and the truth of the matter is that we have a tremendous opportunity to not only ensure that we are holding the oil and gas industry accountable, but we are creating the opportunities to build a sustainable, clean energy economy that will serve not only our state, but help to transition our nation in the direction that we need to go.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Dinesh Benali, and I want to be your congressman. The reason why I want to be your congressman is because my people are suffering because of poor health care. People are being misdiagnosed when they could probably more than likely beat cancer, but instead they're dying early. We have a huge epidemic in diabetes. We have a huge epidemic in opioid abuse because of our health care system. And that's why I'm running for Congress. And also, I firmly believe we have the land and the resources to move forward on agriculture. And with agriculture, we can build jobs, because opportunity, we can improve Mother Nature. And land ownership, affordable housing, funding for our people, for our education, that's what needs to be done. And if we can meet these 4 basic items I mentioned tonight, we will be a better state, we'll be a stronger state, and we'll become a wealthy state. Thank you.
We're standing. All right, I want to speak to the girls and the young women who are here tonight, because the change that's going to come, that has to come, is going to be led by you and young women like you. Time Magazine has an article this week called Youthquake. You all are the youthquake. You are the change that's going to happen. And we collectively have our work cut out, because right now Trump and the Republicans and the special interest, they're trying to take away your right to choose and our right to organize. They're trying to make it easier for it to pollute the water and pollute the air, and they're trying to make it harder for everyone here to vote. They're putting kids in cages, and they're trying to tell us who we get to love. But that's not okay. And collectively, we are going to fight that. So with you, I ask that you stand with me and that we fight to fight climate change and to save our planet, that we fight to get the gun violence off our streets and out of our schools, and that together we ensure that all New Mexicans have access to quality health care. Because we together are going to fight, we're going to fight, we're going to fight, and I hope you'll join me. John Blair, thank you.
So democracy doesn't happen on one day, right? And especially in these scary and urgent times we all know that democracy actually needs to be protected. And it needs to be protected and nourished consistently and intensely. And what you have done today, these marvelous, amazing women, what you have done today is like a lightning bolt of courage and energy for our democracy. So I thank you, and I think we all thank you. And I think that is the key. Democracy is the key. Because if we don't have democracy, we cannot take on all of these wonderful issues that we've had this conversation about today. We can't take those on. I have been fighting for democracy all my life. I've been fighting for social justice, equity, the environment, our cultural heritage and preservation. So I want you to support me in the fight for Congress. And que viva la democracia. Muchísimas gracias.
Well, first of all, I want to really thank you all for putting this together. You rock, because this was really impactful, and in Santa Fe, where our state capital is, and legislature, this was really amazing. So thank you all for putting this together and hanging in there. My name is Laura Montoya, and I want to be your next Congresswoman. I didn't just come up and decide yesterday that I wanted to do this. This is something that I have decided to do since the very beginning of my high school career, when I went to Close-Up and I went to Washington. I sold a lot of blow pops, 4 for $1. I should have sold jewelry instead or something, so it wouldn't have been so much. But the idea is that I promote policies that are fair and equitable for New Mexicans. As the Sandoval County Treasurer elected twice in the fastest growing county, yet I come from the poorest counties in the state of New Mexico, I know now how I can develop the tools that we need in our rural communities. I have 18 bills under my belt where I've helped to eliminate tax loopholes, help our senior citizens and our disabled. So when you look at my history and my record, you will see that the results that I bring to the table have the same values that you do, strong and bold. Thank you.
Can I get another round of applause for all our candidates? Thank you, candidates, for joining us here tonight. We all have a lot to think about. Our Teen Advocacy Council worked hard to develop this forum and be thoughtful of who was going to be in this room this evening. We developed questions that focused on what is important to us young people and recognized what was most important to us through this process. We learned that the adults around us need to listen more to the youth, and that's not just the adults we interact with every day. It's our elected officials, our government. We are your future. It is your responsibility to listen critically and closely. and then to take action. If you do, you will learn newer things and expand the range of solutions to issues that we all face today. Tonight, we addressed issues such as the teacher shortage, limited sexual health education, gun control and school safety, environmental concerns, the increasing struggle of small family farms, and the precarious nature of reproductive rights. All of these topics are directly linked to the daunting statistics of New Mexico. You all have a responsibility in representing all of our voices. We are entrusting you with the safety and security of our futures. Thank you.
Congratulations, candidates and Leadership Council. This was an amazing conversation, and I feel like we could be here all night long talking about these issues. Now, I can say one thing that I hope we can all take away from this evening is that we are all responsible for listening to the young people. They are our leaders of today and tomorrow. So thank you to everyone for showing up for our girls here in New Mexico. And for those of you who can vote, please exercise that right. And candidates, best of luck in the elections.